just yesterday, the team in Wisconsin who uses our fractal technology, just in Wisconsin, they found a whole new scheme that's going on. And it's an absolute fraud scheme by the leftists. And let me walk you through it. This is really interesting.
Please.
So what they're doing is, Biden is flying all of these migrants all over the country. Well, that's not the story. The real story is what happens when they get there. So in Wisconsin and in Minnesota and in Michigan, they're flying migrants in plane load after plane load. I mean, think tens of thousands are flying in. And what they're doing is the religious charities, Catholic charities, Lutheran charities, other religious charities, are setting up these things they call homeless shelters, but they're not homeless shelters. They don't have any beds. They're like an office. And what you do is these homeless people, they're told to go to these locations, and they do. And what do they get? They get debit cards worth several $1,000s. They get free telephones. They get clothing. And then what they get is they get registered to vote. And they are getting registered by the tens of thousands in the swing states. And we're seeing it in the data. I mean, we're not making this up. We actually see it live in the data because remember, we run a lot of the swing states and we essentially have very quick analysis to all the changes in their voter rolls because we're running essentially real-time type systems. Well, then what happens is they register these people, but these people don't stay in Wisconsin and Michigan. They're gone. They're gone in 2 weeks because people who are migrating from Venezuela and Costa Rica aren't going to live in Wisconsin and Minnesota where you're going to freeze your butt off. They're all moving south. So they're ending up in California. They're ending up in Texas. They're under bridges in Austin. They're gone. But what they do is these migrants, really funny, they actually are playing one religious group against another. So they'll go do this and they will harvest, the migrants will harvest all this free money and get themselves registered in Wisconsin. And then they go to Minnesota and they do it again. And these brain dead religious groups are just funding doing this. But the part that's dangerous for the United States, and we're seeing it, I guess, in the data, is these folks are getting registered by the tens of thousands. And what happens is the locations don't show up. Now, in the past, people would know in a state, you would know that 457 Elm Street was a homeless shelter. And if you saw 500 more ballots going to that location than before, it might be a flag. Well, they don't do that anymore. What they're doing is they're setting up a location that could be an office, and there's nobody there. But the ballots are going to go to those locations. Now, we pick that up right away. We have an aggregation system where as soon as a location starts to accumulate voter registration addresses, we see it. And we're seeing it in all of the swing states. So to your point, one of the things that's happening in 2024, to your question, are things getting out of reach? Well, they are. Now, they're not out of reach, but the trajectory is such. The Republicans are blind to this stuff. They think they can out-ballot harvest this kind of stuff. They're absolutely blind to it, and we see it every day. We have the teams calling us from these states. They're desperate because the Republicans aren't helping them. The RNC's not helping them. Trump campaign's not helping them. The voter integrity organizations have abandoned these people, but they're seeing this at scale. So to your point, are things getting out of reach? Well, yeah, they're on that trajectory. I certainly don't think they are, because I never believe that despair is an option. It's just not. But at least now, the difference is we're finding this months before the election as opposed to trying to litigate it afterwards.